Hi, welcome to the Initiative for Faith and Family. This is a critical conversation on the topic of disabilities and specialized needs. And my guest today is Jared Leach. We are going to have a really fun and engaging conversation about something that many of us might feel ill-equipped in the local church. And what does it mean to minister to people who have disabilities or specialized needs and how to come alongside of their families? I know for many of us, we feel that we don't necessarily know what to do in certain situations and we don't know if we're doing it right. But Jared is going to guide us through the biblical implications of that, really revealing the heart of God for this. And then what does it look like to put together ministries and programs within your church, whether you have staff or volunteers at any size, to really honor the heart of God in this area. So I'm really excited just to jump into this conversation. And Jared, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's a blessing to be able to speak on this.
Yeah.
I think there's just so little knowledge out there on the church side of things. You know, you can look up the school side of things, the therapy side of things, but the church side of things, you look it up on the internet and there so little comes up. So to be able to talk about it, to be able to speak about it, just to get more information out there for people, it's a blessing. And
Right.
I'm happy to do it.
That's so good. Well, let's first of all, tell us a little bit about your background and how you got involved in this and how God impassioned your heart for that. But I'd also like you to address, why is that? Why is the church kind of behind maybe the school systems or the social systems that are out there? But first, start with you.
Yeah. I think my story also kind of informs the greater picture too, because I grew up and, I met someone with Down syndrome. I had a friend with Down syndrome, but he acted very differently. And honestly, I didn't like hanging out with him because he acted differently, and there was no one to guide me through that. There was no one to explain why he was different and why he did the things that he did. And so that caused a lot of tension in my heart and created a lot of distance. And so, I'm in high school talking to my guidance counselor, and they're like, "Do you want to work with some special needs as a peer partner?" And I said, "No way, please give me a TA position. I would not like to do that. Thank you." And then graduate high school, ready for a job, so that I can, start paying for college and stuff. And my dad works with school buses. So he was like, "Hey, if you want, you could be a pair on a school bus. It's easy gig. You just get on there, work with some kids." And I told him, "No, thank you. I would not like to do that. That is not where my heart is." And he said, "Go ask your mother." So I went and asked my mother, and she said, "I don't think that's a good idea, Jared." But then after that, I just felt this huge crushing pull, like something is wrong. I don't have peace. As soon as I walked out of that conversation, and I felt like the Lord was like, "Jared, you've been asking how you want to, how I want you to serve. And this is how I want you to serve." And so I applied for the job, got it. And it was hard for about 3 months. It was really hard. Again, there wasn't a lot of people walking you through it, and a lot of questions and a lot of tension and a lot of things like, I just don't understand. How do I do this? And it wasn't until relationships were built with the kids that I started to understand, and me relying on the Lord.
Wow.
Because I would start to ask the Lord, like, how do I
No
do
mentors,
this?
just jumping in
Just
to the
jumping
deep
in.
end.
And that's how a lot of people get involved.
And that is
That
how
is.
we most of the time feel.
Yeah.
I think that story will resonate with a lot of people because we might not have chosen it. We might have even been reticent to step into that, mostly because we feel ignorant, probably, or uncomfortable. We feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But necessity or somebody in our life makes us step into that fuller. So then you started feeling more comfortable. You started gaining just through experience, right? Trial and error.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And started to see things work, started to see improvement in behaviors, started to see the need kind of behind the behavior, because when someone is, throwing things or making noise or yelling at you, you're going to fight or flight, and you just feel it as an attack, but there's always a need behind the behavior. So once you understand that, you unlock something, and you start having a greater understanding, a greater empathy. The Lord is so gracious in giving, different ideas and different things that, I feel like it takes such a creative mind to do it well sometimes that,
Yeah.
our human brains can be so finite. So relying on the Lord to just put things in front of you has helped so much. Even, 10 years later, every individual you meet is new, and you
Right.
need new ideas and new skills, and you're always learning. And there's something that I love about that, always kind of having to remake the wheel.
But that's true for
But
every relationship, right?
yes,
Every human
absolutely.
being we meet, every friendship, every relationship we have requires dependence on the Lord,
Yes.
and it requires a new skill set because every human being is different. So in
Yes.
that regard, it is
Thank
similar.
you so much for pointing that out, because there's definitely this fact that to a lot of us, even as a parent of a 2-year-old, behavior is a need. It
Yes.
always relates to just different relationships.
Right. I
Um,
once heard every behavior is a form of communication.
yeah, absolutely.
A
It's
behavior is communicating something. That's even helped me in my marriage.
yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
why am I
Yes.
reacting the way I'm
Conflict
communicating something?
management.
What am I trying to communicate right
Uh-huh.
now? What are you communicating?
Even
Yeah.
self-reflection.
Sure.
I feel angry. I want to throw at something. What do I need? Whoa,
Yeah.
what do I need?
Right.
Helps
So
so much.
it started progressively, and then God started attuning your heart to
Definitely.
this demographic, and then what? Because now this is what you do. This is your life. This is what you do, and
Yeah.
your role in your church is to oversee the disability and specialized needs ministry. So how'd you get from there to here?
Yeah. So I, at the same time, kind of like 6 months after saying yes to that job, I decided to kind of switch churches and go to a church. And they had a special needs program, and I was like, okay, I do this professionally. I can help. I'll just do that.
Okay.
And also made the choice that maybe it's time to start looking at going to the school route, going to college for this. So switched my degree path
Okay.
from wildlife management to
Wow.
special education, which is about as opposite as you can get.
Yeah.
And then started walking alongside a 6-year-old with Down syndrome on the church side and fell in love with that. I mean, it was
Mm.
one thing to do things in the school setting. It was another thing to start teaching about Jesus at church, and watching him grow and his faith shape. It was mind blowing. And I started to pray, like, Lord, if I could do anything, I would love to do this.
Wow,
Like,
what
I'm okay with working in the schools, but
a total 180 from where
yeah,
you
yeah.
started. Oh,
And the Lord has just been so faithful. So, did some work in the school district, our local school district, taught special education for a few years. But roles in the church don't often come. And so, the Lord blessed me with being able to do what I do. And so,
mhm.
now this is what I get to do
Wow.
ministry for these individuals. And it's the biggest blessing, I think, and such a fulfillment of so many promises. And
Yeah.
um, yeah, it leaves me with like, I don't know if there's anything next for me.
Wow.
It's like,
Yes,
this is
there will be.
fantastic,
There
but
will be, but wow, what a story of God's faithfulness
yeah.
and your obedience. I think if all of us opened our hearts to that, we would find ourselves doing and living out the gifts that God already entrusted to us in great ways. So that's such a
Mm,
fun testimony. So let's go back to, because I know in your position you oversee the disability and specialized needs for kids, teens, and adults.
mhm.
So the whole spectrum of it. But why is it that you feel that the church is lagging behind? I want to go back to
Yeah,
that because I do think
absolutely.
we have to confront that in our churches. I think it would be easy to say, like, oh, we don't have the resources, which
Yeah.
might be true, but also,
Yeah, yeah. I think in the same way, we get these individuals, they come into our church, maybe they try our church for the first time and they're making noise, they're having behaviors, and church this is a quiet place of reverence.
okay.
And so there's some conflict there, and just some special needs diagnoses are not well equipped for that, or um the amount of people can be really confronting to someone with special needs. So it's going to cause them to act out a little bit more. And that, again, if you don't understand it, you don't understand that that's a need to be filled. It just creates distance. It creates tension. And I think people's natural reaction is, whoa, I'm not equipped for this. I'm not the guy. And they say, hey, thank you for coming, but I don't think we have the supports to help you. And it's in some ways true, right? If you don't understand, you're not really equipped. But unfortunately, I think it's the case for 80% of churches that they have really nothing for kids, teens, and adults with special needs.
That's a staggering
It
statistic.
is, especially when 1 in 5 individuals across, our nation has a special needs. So,
Wow.
that's
1 in 5.
1 in
That
5.
really puts it in perspective. So there's a gap.
Yes, there's a huge gap to be filled because you're missing out on, 1/5 of God's people, in your church. And when you do get to know them, they're such beautiful, rich people. And it takes kind of getting down to their level and stepping into their world and just building a relationship, just like you would any new person. But it takes a lot more care and attention to do it. But once that relationship is formed, I think it drops so many of these, stigmas and barriers and fears. And honestly, a lot of times it does come down to anxiety and fear in people. It just stirs our hearts, and it did mine until I had to walk into those relationships. And
that's okay. I think it's okay for us to acknowledge rather than to just say like, no, I'm perfectly comfortable. Like, I think it's okay to say I'm uncomfortable, and how can I get to a place of more comfort and familiarity, education, time with the Lord? All these things are going to happen, but I think it's okay just to acknowledge,
absolutely,
I'm uncomfortable, because that's a starting point of just honesty, right? Or like you said, some of the outbursts or some of the movement or something might be distracting to people in churches. And I wonder how we even cross that barrier to make it normative. I know even sitting next to people who have infants who are crying, the parents feel like, oh my gosh, my baby's being loud. And I work in family ministry, so I'm like, that's a baby crying. Like, I'm so happy they're here,
Yeah, exactly.
But I do think maybe even pastors could lead the way and say like, hey, we're going to have all kinds of different sounds and movements, whether we're worshiping God or there's a baby crying or we have a friend with us today who, like, let's embrace all of it. Maybe even just something like that could help us.
Yeah, it's a beautiful picture of Christ's love when Christ welcomes all to himself. If the pastor, reflects that and teaches this congregation that we're going to welcome in all people, all disabilities, no matter what they got going on, it's not going to be pretty sometimes, it's going to be tough, but we're going to try and work it out,
this is who we want to be.
This is who we want to be. And I think the beauty of that is you do look upon your congregation and you do see a fuller, spectrum of, the image of God, a fuller picture of God's people. And it reflects what's outside of the church. It reflects the community at large. And a lot of these families are starving for community. They're starving for relationship. And I think the church has a huge opportunity here to step into it's at face value outreach, at a larger picture, just a beautiful ministry, a welcoming in so many gifts and so many different perspectives on life and on faith and on the Lord. And it's really cool.
Well, we're touching on it, but let's dive into this a little bit more. This idea of having a more robust biblical understanding of the image of God and all of his creation, of people. How do those two things go together with disabilities and specialized needs and the image of God from a biblical perspective?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things to explore, because I think a lot of times we look at someone with special needs and we say, that's really hard. They're suffering from our view. And, we just kind of chalk that under brokenness and sin. The world is broken. The world, is not how it should be. And so we kind of put those with special needs sometimes in that camp. Like they have that because, the world's a broken place and it's sad. And I'm not convinced of that, to be honest, especially looking at some of the scriptures. First one, when Jesus is, heals the man born blind, and the disciples and the Pharisees, they're asking, who sinned, the mother or him, or what's going on here? And I think that reflects a lot of our understanding of it. We say, this is sin, this is brokenness. And the Lord says, no, it's for my glory. And I think, again, we can kind of say like, oh, it's for Jesus's glory so that he can heal him, right? And I'm not also convinced of that, because when you look at Exodus 4:11, Moses is talking and he says, I'm not good at speaking, Lord. And the Lord says, I make the deaf, I make the blind, I make, the lame, and who can say what I've done? I make them. Psalm 139, you knit me together, you formed me. And so I think when you read those, it starts to point to, there's a mystery to the image of God.
Correct.
But what if there's something about disabilities that reflects a greater picture? What we see as different is just a different expression of the image of God. And when you start to look at those with special needs, you start to just see a richness, a different faith that sometimes, many times, transcends, our own understanding of the Lord of faith. They have these deep, deep gifts that until you step into relationship, you don't get to see. They have a zeal for the Lord. They have, less fear around praying for people. I can get so socially awkward sometimes and worry about, am I hearing the Lord? But, my friend with Down syndrome, he'll come over and start laying his hands on people because the pastor said to, and he doesn't think twice.
Wow.
About it, because he just has a fuller love for people. He doesn't see someone has special needs and someone doesn't. People are people to him, and he loves all of them regardless. They have this unconditional love that I don't possess.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of us possess. And until you step into a relationship, you're missing out. You really are missing out on this wonderful perspective. They teach us in many ways, and you're missing out on these humans that are just so beautiful in their own way.
Yeah.
Hard sometimes to walk with, but beautiful people.
Yes. Many years ago, God brought a young man with special needs into our family, and the journey has been a journey, that's just what it is. It's a journey, because he was learning and we were learning and all the things. And I remember really, just because of our inadequacies and our lack of education, us trying to form him into something, and it just wasn't working. And I remember just having a conversation with the Lord one night saying, I don't know why you gave him to us, because we can't seem to fix him. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if it was the exact words, but it was like, I can't seem to make this work.
Yeah.
And I clearly felt God saying, oh, I didn't give him to you for you to fix him.
Wow.
I gave him to you to fix you. And having that perspective of like, there's so much in me that needed fixing, that needed confronting. All of that really just peeled back layers of my heart to say, there's so much I don't even know about how I interact with this world or God in ways that was really revealing by being with somebody who was different than me.
Yeah.
Speak to that, because it does reveal stuff about us that
it does.
God is fixing.
Yes. I think in many ways their disability is visible and our disability is invisible, and I think that also points back to the image of God piece and the way that we are differently formed, and we all have different challenges, some due to sin, but others just due to walking through life and trauma and all these things that we walk through. I think nobody, walks through life unscathed. And
no, that's true.
Oftentimes we make that, distance between ourselves and them. And we say, we're in this camp, typical. They're in this camp, not typical. And I think that goes just very human. We make differences, and we can be judgmental, which is again another, thing that we lack that they don't.
Well, for me, this is the conversation that needs to continue to happen, right?
Yes.
This needs to be brought to the forefront, and we're going to dive into this more. But before we close out this session, I just want you to talk a little bit about James chapter 2. I know this is something that's
Yeah.
important to your heart. And recently you were asked to do an assessment of your church just at a cursory level. And you've uncovered and unearthed some things that just weren't visible to maybe everyone, that really kind of brought some things to the forefront. But talk about that assessment that you did, and also in its relationship to James chapter 2.
Yeah. Okay. So I just started hearing little whispers and little things. Somebody would say, I need this, which is it always kind of throws a red flag in my brain, just wired to think about people's needs and try and fill them. And so that was one thing. I just started hearing little things that people needed, like my child needs to use the restroom. They weigh 100 pounds. I can't lift them up. And, there's no changing table was the first thing that I heard, for our teens and adults with special needs. They need a we have our infant changing tables, but they need something larger to be able to accommodate that. So we have to go home. And then it's like, oh, okay, we'll try and figure that out. But then there was a couple other things that I heard or saw that I was like, okay, there's more. And then there was one time I was just, introducing a new family, and they had a child with a wheelchair, and we go into the sanctuary, and it's like, let's sit down. And, I can tell that the child wants to sit closer, but our only wheelchair accessible seating's in the back. And so it's like, oh, I don't love that, because not a lot of people in our church like to sit in the back, And so there's distance. You can see the distance between this family and the other families. And that hurt my heart a little bit, And then I start to meditate on that. And James chapter 2 starts ringing in my ears a little bit, Don't seat the poor man at your feet, and don't give the rich people, the seat at the front.
Preferred seating.
Right.
Yeah.
Preferred seating. Right there. The sin of partiality. And so I don't think that's an intentional sin, but it's just wired to how we've been operating, or, even doing church for so long, you just start to do what you have always done and you don't think about it. And even I, for months and months and months, it wasn't on my radar until I was confronted with it. And so I think that points to just, if you want to look at church accessibility, you just have to look at what are we doing for other people that is leaving the poor people, either poor in spirit or poor in ability, or, maybe even poor financially. Do we have paywalls between being able to be in the church? And trying to close that gap. So let's look at removing some chairs at the front of the, seating so that we can accommodate a wheelchair spot. We have, thankfully, sloped surfaces in our sanctuary that, people in wheelchairs can access the front. We just have to make space for them. Easy. Let's remove a couple chairs.
It's so easy.
Easy.
Yeah, you had mentioned to me earlier that you had been on a subway, and instead of the sign saying handicapped seating, it just said preferred seating. And I loved that.
Yeah.
It's preferred. Like, this is the best. You can sit in the back too, but you can sit in the middle. You can sit.
Yeah.
But we have some preferred seating for you to honor you.
It's priority seating. Let's bring you up to a place of honor. And that's actually reflected in one of my favorite parables in Luke 14, throwing a banquet. And don't throw the banquet for your rich friends, who are going to invite you to their banquet. Throw the banquet for those with disabilities, the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame. Bring them in, because that glorifies them, and in heaven, in turn, you'll be glorified. And I think, when the Bible is saying invite them in, give them the preferential seating, let's go, let's do it. It's
let's do it.
And you feel it. You feel richer for it, definitely. And that's not like a place of like, we're so great, we did it. But you just, when you see that person elevated, and even sometimes yourself, you know, set in a lower spot sometimes serving these people, it changes the way you see the world, your faith, the way you see people. It builds just this beautiful empathy that now I look at the two paths my life could have gone, wildlife management or special needs. It's like my life is so rich because of this, and
Mm.
not because of anything I've done, but just because I've gotten to know such beautiful people, and my world has been expanded in many ways. And um, I wouldn't, leave it for anything.
Yeah. That is the way of Christ, the
Hmm.
downward trajectory from a place of being high all the way down to the lowest and becoming the servant. I mean, that is what Christ calls us to in the Christian life. And I'm so excited for the rest of our conversation, but this is the conclusion of the first segment. And Jared, we look forward to having you back and continuing this conversation. But this has been such a rich start to understanding. And so we hope you'll join us for session 2 of our critical conversation on specialized needs, disabilities with our guest, Jared Leach. Thank you for joining us. And if you want more information about this, you can check it out on our website, which is the-iff.com. Thank you so much for being here.